shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and the things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
All right, let's see what the file cabinet's willing to give us tonight. Oh, now don't you start. No, absolutely not. Thing gives me the creeps. Shut up. All right. Let's see. Oh no, Matt, this is a Polaroid of the studio.
Okay.
Taken from inside the studio.
Also okay.
Before the studio existed.
Less okay.
Boy. And now we've got a snow globe, tiny graveyard inside, little headstones, crooked fence.
What's it doing?
Oh, that's nice. It's shaking by itself.
Set that down. Actually, no. Set that down gently and maybe apologize to it.
And here it is, tonight's episode.
All right, let's do it.
This is episode 302, Monster of Marmotte Street.
A dark southern legend, a frightened neighborhood, and one eerie stretch of road where something may have been watching from the shadows. I'm Matt Wilson.
And I'm Juniper Ravenwood.
And this is episode 302, Monster of Marmotte Street.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson, produced by Juniper Ravenwood, with Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Tonight we're headed into the wet dark of North Mobile, Alabama, where winter fog clung low to the ground and something in 1938 began moving through the neighborhood like it knew exactly when people were starting to get nervous. They called it the Monster of Marmotte Street. Some called it the Frankenstein of Fisher's Alley. And the stories that came with it only got stranger the longer the thing stayed unseen.
Yeah, and that is always a bad sign. When nobody can agree on what they saw, but everybody agrees they do not want to see it again. That's when a case starts to get real interesting.
This one has all the ingredients, too. Swamp edge, barking dogs, people gathering in the streets, police getting dragged into it, and a creature that seemed to change shape depending on who was telling the story.
So tonight, we're opening the file on a southern neighborhood panic that turned into one of those forgotten monster legends that still feels damp around the edges.
And once we open this one, Matt, I'm not sure we're closing it without tracking Mud back into the studio.
Yeah.
So go ahead, let's see what was waiting out there on Marmotte Street.
All right, Juniper. Thanks for digging into the file cabinet again and pulling out a case that feels like it crawled right up out of black water and fog. Tonight's file takes us to North Mobile, Alabama in the winter of 1938, near 3 Mile Creek, where people began whispering that something was moving through the alleys after dark. The newspapers called it the Monster of Marmotte Street, and sometimes the Frankenstein of Fisher's Alley. Whatever name people used, the effect was the same. A whole neighborhood started looking at the night like it was hiding teeth. And the case gets strange fast. Reports from the Times said frightened residents had been hunting this thing for days, and police got pulled into the panic. One widely reprinted account said officers had to deal with residents firing guns into the dark while chasing whatever they believed was out there. That same coverage said the creature attacked a prize pig named Roosevelt, then vanished toward the thick swamp by 3 Mile Creek, leaving large tracks behind. One witness said it was about 8 feet long, looked like a seal, and jumped like a kangaroo. That is such an odd, wrong combination that you can almost feel the confusion of somebody trying to describe something they do not have words for. And that setting matters. This wasn't some bright open field at noon. This was a swamp edge neighborhood in winter. Damp cold, muddy ground, dark lanes, back fences, dogs barking from yards, and the creek not far off. The kind of place where every rustle gets your attention. The kind of place where rumor can move faster than whatever made the first noise. Once fear settled in, every shadow had room to become something worse. The descriptions only made that worse because nobody agreed on what they had seen. Some said the creature had a white ring of almost phosphorescent hair around its neck. Others said it had scales like a dinosaur. Others made it sound huge, black, and shaggy. Once those details started circulating, the legend stopped acting like one animal and started acting like 10. Was it a beast from the swamp? A ghost? An escaped circus lion? Or because old folklore never stays buried for long, some version of the loup-garou? That werewolf thing people whispered about in Southern Dark? The minute a story starts collecting that many shapes, it stops feeling natural. It becomes a presence. One of the eeriest moments in the reporting is the church scare. A woman rushed into a service screaming that the monster was at the front door. People abandoned their pews and moved to bar the entrance. Just imagine that for a second. A place that is supposed to feel safe suddenly feels surrounded. The dark has followed you to church. In that specific incident, the paper said the preacher looked out and found his own dog scratching at the door. But by then, the damage was done. Fear had already flooded the room. The neighborhood had become so primed that even a familiar sound could arrive wearing the monster's face. And then came the attack stories. One later retelling based on those newspaper reports described a man named S.L. Bowman showing up with scratches on his neck and saying the creature had leapt at him out of the 3 Mile Creek swamp on Fisher's Alley. He described a 6-foot animal with dark fur and a white mark around the neck and said he only got away because someone came running to help him. Whether every detail landed exactly as told or not, the emotional weight of it is clear. Now this wasn't just something glimpsed at the edge of a yard. Now it had claws. Now it was close enough to touch. That's how a neighborhood legend hardens almost overnight. One sighting becomes 3. A scream becomes a patrol. A wounded animal becomes proof. A rumor picks up a name, and once it has a name, it starts to feel real in a whole new way. Marmotte Street, Fisher's Alley, 3 Mile Creek. Suddenly the monster has a route, a territory, a place it knows better than the people trying to hunt it. And that is where this file gets its hooks in, because before anybody ever offered an explanation, North Mobile was already living inside the story. And once a whole neighborhood starts giving the dark a name, it gets a whole lot harder to make the darkness ordinary again.
That's the part that sticks with me. Not just the creature, but how fast it seemed to spread it through everybody's nerves.
When we come back, we'll dig into how the story got even bigger, how the descriptions got even stranger, and whether the answer people finally got really explained what had them so terrified in the first place.
The deeper you get into this one, the more it stops feeling like just a monster story and starts feeling like one of those nights where old neighborhood can almost hear fear talking to itself. By now, our listeners are probably wondering whether this thing was ever really one creature at all, or whether it became something bigger the second people started trying to describe it. And we're not done yet, because the second half gets even stranger once the reports, the rumors, and the so-called explanation all starts colliding. Right now, over to Chris Beach.
Juniper, quick message from the shadows. No matter where you're listening, hitting that like, follow, or subscribe button is the absolute best way to support the Shadow Frequency. You'll find us on YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Rumble, and all your favorite podcast apps. Visit shadowfrequencypodcast.com for the full archive, the Shadow blog, creepy cool merch, and a voicemail line where you can send us a message anytime. You might hear yourself on a future episode. Back into the files, Juniper.
Thank you, Chris. Time to fire up the spectrocosmic message materializer. Let's flip the switches. Let's see what it coughs up from the static tonight. Here comes a strange little scrap of listener energy drifting through the cosmic noise.
Message retrieved from the
Let's unfold
void.
it carefully and see what our listener had to say. This one says, "Hey, Matt, Juniper, and Chris. This is Debbie from Indiana. I listen on Pandora. Usually of an evening when I'm just sitting alone in the quiet, and the Shadow Frequency has really become one of my favorite listens. I enjoy reading the blog, and I've also been getting into the show notes over on Patreon. I love all the different topics you cover, but cryptids are probably my favorite. Just wanted to say I really love the show and keep up the great work. Debbie from Indiana." Debbie, that's such a great note. First off, thank you for listening with us during those quiet evening hours, because honestly, that is exactly the kind of setting this show was built for. And I love hearing that you've been checking out the blog and the Patreon show notes too. That means a lot. And yeah, cryptids do have a way of crawling right to the top of the favorites list, don't they? And as always, if you want to send us your own note, your strange story, or just let us know where and how you listen, you can email us at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. All right, Matt, let's head back out to the swamp edge and see what was really prowling around North Mobile.
You are tuned to the Shadow Frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper and Debbie. Thank you for that note from Indiana. We appreciate you being out there in the quiet with us, especially on a cryptid night like this one. Well, I got me a refill on my iced tea, lit some incense in here, got the fan on. So let's get back to North Mobile, because one reason the Monster of Marmotte Street still works is that it never held still. The more people talked, the less stable the creature became. One person gave it glowing hair. Another gave it scales. Another said it was impossibly large. Another said bullets bounced off of it. Once that starts happening, the creature becomes bigger than whatever first triggered the fear. It stops being just an animal and starts carrying everything else people dread about the night. The swamp, the dark, old folklore, strange noises, and the feeling that after sundown the world is not quite under control. There's also another layer here that makes the case more haunting. Period coverage framed the panic through segregation-era language and made clear that the scare centered in black neighborhoods of Mobile. That matters because it tells you the fear was real, but it was also being filtered through newspapers that could sensationalize it and turn it into a spectacle for readers outside the neighborhood. In other words, the monster was not just in the alleys, it was in the telling too. Then comes the official ending. In mid-February 1938, reports said the so-called monster was finally killed after entering the yard of Charles Ardoin. Accounts said Ardoin's collie tangled with the creature. A neighbor fired a shotgun, and the dead monster turned out to be an otter, around 30 pounds and about 4 feet long from head to tail. One report said around 200 people came to see it afterward, and the family charged 10 cents admission. Terror one week, backyard exhibit the next. That detail alone makes the whole thing feel even stranger. Now, of course, here's the one place where I'll allow a little skepticism into the file. If an otter wandered in from nearby water, fought dogs, moved low and fast in poor light, and startled already anxious residents, you can absolutely see how the first sightings might have spiraled. Add darkness, swamp terrain, competing stories, and a neighborhood already on edge, and it is not hard to imagine an ordinary animal becoming an extraordinary monster in the retelling. That part makes sense. But the rational explanation does not erase the atmosphere. In some ways, it deepens it, because even after the otter was produced, the case still carried all the residue of something larger. The armed searches, the church panic, the neck scratches, the giant track stories, the werewolf talk, the phosphorescent hair, the bulletproof hide rumors. Once a neighborhood has lived through fear at that level, the official answer can feel almost too neat. Maybe not false, just too tidy for the size of the dread that came before it. And that is why the legend lived. The animal may have died as an otter, but the story did not. The story kept the night stalker, the impossible beast, the thing sliding in from the swamp and testing the edges of backyards after dark. That's what folklore does. It preserves the feeling longer than it preserves the facts. That's why I love cases like this. They sit right on the line between cryptid tale and social history. Was there a real creature? Almost certainly. Did people truly get scared? Absolutely. Did rumor and retelling make it bigger, darker, and weirder than the underlying animal probably was? Well, I think it's possible. But even knowing that, I still can't shake the image of North Mobile in 1938. Wet ground, low fog, dogs going wild, people gripping shotguns on porches, and something slipping back toward 3 Mile Creek before anybody got a clean look at it. Maybe the last truth of the Monster of Marmotte Street is this: sometimes a legend does not survive because the explanation failed. Sometimes it survives because the explanation arrived too late. By the time the otter was on the ground, the neighborhood had already met something bigger, fear itself, moving yard to yard, alley to alley, wearing whatever face the dark needed. And once the dark has worn a face in a place like that, people remember it long after the body is gone.
I'll give the otter this much. That is one heck of a way to become immortal.
It sure is. Whether it was a swamp beast, rumor storm, or one badly misunderstood hunter from the water, the Monster of Marmotte Street still leaves us with that old question: what exactly did people hear coming toward them at night? And how much of it was already inside them before it ever arrived? Juniper, let's close the file.
Tonight, we followed the Monster of Marmotte Street back into a damp, fearful corner of 1938 North Mobile, where rumor, folklore, and something very real in the dark came together to create a legend that never quite died. Whether it was a swamp terror, a panic-fed nightmare, or an ordinary creature turned extraordinary by fear, it is still one of those stories that leaves mud on your shoes and questions in your head. Thanks for joining us tonight on the Shadow Frequency. We always appreciate you listening, sharing the show, and creeping along with us into these strange old cases. Don't forget, you can email us anytime at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. You can also find our website, shadowfrequencypodcast.com. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep your porch light on, and maybe think twice before assuming that sound outside is just an animal. Matt, you want to say goodnight?
Good night, everybody. And if you hear something moving out by the fence line, maybe let it pass.
We'll see you next time for another strange case right here on the Shadow Frequency. Good night, Shadow Seekers.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and your entertainment.